Hello, good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in the world. And my name is Jacquelyn Haley, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist based in the UK. And today I'm really excited to be joined by the gorgeous Wendie, director and founder of a tribe of healers and author of her latest book called The Devil's Therapy. Hello, welcome, Wendie. How are you?
Hi, Jacquelyn. Great to see you again.
Fab. Right. Today's interview is going to be all about Regress the Cause, and about Wendie's course, and more importantly about the book that she's just relaunched. I will be keen to say it's a relaunch of a book that she published quite a few years ago, and the book itself is based on what we call a 200-year fairy tale, a 200-year-old fairy tale. I'm just going to read off here just to make sure I get it right. It's a 3-phase, 7-step system facilitating effective regression to cause hypnosis. The Devil's Therapy will change how you think about regression and hypnotherapy. Now, for me, Wendie, personally, I've done a few regress to cause or regression hypnosis courses over the years, and I was trained in hypnoanalysis when I qualified in 2008. And I've done the Dave Ellman course. I've trained with other big names as well. But I have to say, when I did your course, it completely opened my eyes to a whole new way of looking at regress to cause therapy. And over the last couple of years, no, I'm not just saying this is why I was so excited to finally interview you, because over the years, and we met through various hypnotherapy groups, what I found and others have found is that when it comes to giving answers to other hypnotherapists who are asking questions about their clients, you always come in with the most in-depth and the most fascinating answers, which show us all that it's not just about the hypnotherapy for you. It runs a lot deeper, doesn't it?
It does, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited. Thank you so much for that, because I want to change how you think about healing with the mind. And so I give in-depth responses to questions because the solution is not in the technique, it's in how you think when you're guiding a client through a healing process. And if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, your sessions are going to rock.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I wanted to share this with you. It was a few years ago, and I was working with a gentleman, and he's given me full permission to discuss. He was having non-epileptic fits, and his life was on standstill. Literally, he couldn't go out because they were fast, they were furious, and they had taken over his life. So we started off very gently. I taught him meditation techniques. We looked at diet, because I'm trained to work with diet, particularly the keto, which is known to have great effects with epilepsy. And slowly but surely I started to see him for treatment. We did have reflexology in it as well, until we led up to the main regress to cause session. And that was 18 months ago. He has not had one fit since. He's just got his driving license back. The remainder of his brain tumor, which they thought they could never get rid of, has gone as well. Nothing short of a miracle. And it was actually cancer. He did have a brain tumor, which was what started me in this in the first place. And I know you've got your own great story about working with Peter with cancer. I know I'm digressing a little bit here because I got so many questions for you. It's like, where do I start, So, but I want to go back to talking about you in the groups. And a lot of therapists that I see are asking questions about how to deal with clients. And this is me being open, honest and blunt now, things that they should know from their training. Yeah. So when we come in with the deeper answers, looking at regression, whereas for me, since training, I mean, I know we've told it's not for everyone, but I just find my results are a lot better since I've been working with regress to cause hypnosis. So I can probably go back to a question that was in the group a few weeks back about an eating disorder, and how we talk about the disorders and what we suffer from are really the trauma, not so much the trauma, but it's traumatic, and the healing lies somewhere a lot deeper. So you want to look at one of the questions I prepared for this evening is where the secret to success lies, and what are the 2 R's in regression when you're dealing with that kind of trauma or those traumatic events, those traumatic memories, and they're a lot deep inside our clients.
You went right for the nut. That's the question. I regress. And I know that different schools have different philosophies, and they teach different approaches to working with hypnosis. But the fundamental purpose for regression is based in the idea that every problem is the result of a life experience. The symptoms don't just arise out of nowhere. Something must have happened to cause them. And so regression to cause is about identifying what that cause is. Now, why wouldn't you just treat the symptoms? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, most of the time people do not go to a hypnosis practitioner as their first solution. It's not until they've already exhausted all the other methods and techniques and pills and surgery and everything else, and they're frustrated, they're depressed, they're probably medicated, and they end up on your doorstep. You are not going to get anywhere simply addressing the symptoms. There's too many of them ganged up on the client. And so that's an indication you're dealing with an emotional issue. You need to go back and find out what caused it. The other reason for regression is that when you're working with an emotional issue that's had all this time to build up, because many of these problems are rooted in traumatic experiences in childhood. So there's a lot of pressure has built up. For example, you think about somebody who has panic attacks, there's a lot of pressure there or an anxiety disorder. There's a tremendous amount of pressure. Going to the causal event is much easier on the client because it's the weakest link in the chain. Yeah. The first time they ever felt that fear, it's not a big fear. But give that the compounding effect of having that reinforced 379 times over the course of a lifetime, it's going to be really, really a scary experience. So we just want to prevent the client from being re-traumatized by finding that initial sensitizing event and resolving it where it got started. Once you do that, you pull the plug. It's like pulling the plug in the bathtub. All the energy of that event starts to drain out. And then it's simply a matter of using some of those polishing techniques to reinforce those changes, to install newer, better responses, newer and better behaviors, the newer and better expectations for the future. And in my opinion, it's just much easier on a client when you're dealing with an emotional issue.
I know. The way I like to think of it like a forest or a terrain. And if we've got a lot of adverse reactions, ACEs they call them, we've got like this forest which is overgrown with weeds and the trees don't grow straight and it's just a mess. So we've got that beautiful kind of tended meadow. And so of course when you go in and try to plant a new tree or a new seed, the one of faith, self-belief, self-love, all the things that we want them to go on into life with, how can we plant them when there's so many weeds growing over? It's not. Yeah. And another way I like to look at it is that we look at environment all the time, because I could put somebody in a freezer, lock them in, terrible, and say, affirm to yourself, I'm boiling, it's warm, I'm really warm. Eventually they're going to freeze, because it's the environment where they're in. So if we can pull all those weeds out and make those trees all nice and then have some nice fresh earth to plant the new seeds in, so they will go on and flourish.
That's a great metaphor too, because there are certain plants and trees that will not germinate unless there's been a fire. So basically, the fire will sweep through and, just basically clean house. And then what this does is it prepares the ground for all of this new growth to occur. And it happens very naturally. And I believe that healing does happen very naturally. It's not something that we do. I think the role of a therapist is to create the conditions which allow healing to happen. And when we're working with emotional issues, I think the primary purpose of or intention for the therapist needs to be to make it safe for the client to allow the healing to happen.
It's when I trained with Beryl a few years ago, it was like having the guts to go there, then have the guts and the courage. Oh, I would like to say the compassion, because when you really are working with your clients, you want the best from them. You have to have that compassion.
Well,
go there with them as well,
it
isn't
takes
it?
guts. I'll tell you something. You need to be fearless in your session
Yeah.
rooms. It takes guts to do regression work, not because it's dangerous or because you're entering into forbidden territory. It's because too many people have been conditioned to be afraid of emotions. So that if the therapist is frightened by the client's fear, if the therapist is frightened by their anger or overwhelmed by the client's sadness, then you're not in the right place. You're definitely need to do your own work so that you can show up fully for the client. And that's when you have that courage. That's when you're in that fearlessness, because it doesn't matter what the client's bringing up. You know what to do.
Exactly, and this is right. And another common kind of throwaway comment we get is now, why would you make your client relive those awful kind of traumatic experiences? How can you put them through it,
I know, it's so cruel, isn't it? Here's the thing. If you understand how the subconscious mind works, you realize that the client is doing it to themselves. Every time they bump into a situation or a person or anything occurs that acts as a reminder of that traumatic event, it kicks in, they get triggered. And this kicks the subconscious mind into reviewing that traumatic issue. And so they are either consciously or unconsciously reliving that event all the time. And so you can put an end to that. Again, we just want to get back to the initial sensitizing event because it's the weakest link in the chain. It usually doesn't have a really strong emotional charge to it. So it's the least traumatizing experience for the client. And we even have techniques we can use if it happens to be something really serious, like maybe they, as an infant or something really bad happened. I mean, I've worked with lots of abuse, and sometimes it can be pretty terrifying for a child. Well, we have techniques that can protect the child from having to experience the pain or the terror until we can get the client in a place where they can process that memory. And that's the key, that, all the research in memory reconsolidation has shown, and there's well over a decade now of really solid empirical based research into memory reconsolidation. And the writing is on the wall. Until the causal event is faced and felt, to release the emotional charge that's trapped in it, it will continue to affect the person negatively.
And there's that simple song we learned as children, the wise man builds his house upon the rocks, and the poor man builds his house on the sand. And that's more or less what we do through life, isn't it? And I think for us, when you're in the therapy industry, you get the tools to recognize that within you, but then it's for our own healing, because we all go through it as well, don't we? But then to work with the clients with that same simple analogy, it just makes so much sense, doesn't it? We can do all the healing in the world, but if we've got a poor foundation, it will just keep collapsing on us all the time,
Yeah, and it's also, I'm very aligned with a client-centered approach as opposed to a technique-centered approach. So I'm always mystified when I get on a forum and somebody says, oh, I've got a client, they're coming in, and they'll list this, it'll be a symptom or a diagnosis. So they got fibromyalgia, or they've got an anxiety disorder, or they've got whatever, give me a list of names. But they'll say, well, I got a client that called me up and they've got this problem. What technique should I use? Or does anybody have a script for it? And it's like,
I know.
Why are you asking that question? You don't even know what the problem is.
Yeah, exactly.
All you know are the symptoms of the problem. And you haven't even talked to the client. It's not until you actually do some preliminary investigative work, that preliminary uncovering work, that you can identify the symptom imperative that is, that's coming up from the subconscious mind. That's what your intake is all about. You want to find out, so where's this, how is this pattern expressing, and what might it be pointing to? Because the symptom is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. It's how the subconscious mind lets the conscious mind know, hey, there's a problem down here.
Yeah. Also, I was like, hey boys, chuck me some more of that. I remember reading, is it Joseph Murray, The Subconscious Mind? He talks about it being the captain of the ship, or the conscious, and it kind of fuels down, it shuts down to the the engine master, throw some more coal in here. We need some more energy to deal with this. And I always get this little image then of this captain shouting down to the subconscious, show me more of that. Or when
So he refers to the subconscious mind as the captain, or the
well,
conscious?
so the conscious is the captain giving the directions of what it needs. Like, yeah, it's shouting down. I always have this like little image in my head when I start working with people, like the ship.
Right, and that's I agree with that as well. The subconscious mind cannot make decisions. All it does is it basically it stores what we've learned and uses it as a reference for future decision making at a conscious level. But the conscious mind makes decisions. So when you regress back to, say, let's say we go back to a 3-year-old, and you're talking to that 3-year-old, you were talking to the conscious mind at the age of 3, and it only has the learning and the maturity and the emotional development of 3 years of its life. If you go to a 15-year-old, you're talking to the conscious mind at the age of 15. When we do the inner child work, what we do is we take the adult now. So if your client is, say, 50, you're taking the 50-year-old conscious mind back to have a talk with the conscious mind with the 3-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Which is good to move on.
Ideally, what we want to do is we want to change the decisions that were made in the causal event, because that's what's causing the problem. It's not the feeling that's the problem. A feeling just tells us there is a problem. And it gives us an indication of what the nature of the problem is. For example, if it's fear, usually it's fear. Fear is simply that I'm perceiving a threat and I don't know how to deal with it, or I'm not able to deal with it. And if it's anger, then it's, you know, I need some boundaries here. Anger steps in to defend when we're not able to run away. And if it's sadness, then it's pointing to a loss. And those are the 3 key emotions that you're going to look for. But fear is the mother of all negative emotion. And so most of the time, that is what you're looking for. That first little, you know, that's feeling that something's not right, or there's a sense of threat. Find the thought that's generating that, and you will find the cause.
I remember, I'm a big fan of a guy called Alberto Vidolo. He's a professional psychology anthropologist. He did a lot of, by accident, he found himself in the Amazon jungle training with all the shamans. And his kind of whole thing, he says, it's when the world stopped becoming a safe place for that child.
Right.
And that's a good way to look at it, isn't it?
Right.
You know? Which moves me on nicely to the next I wanted to talk about is, like, again, something I recognize with you, but obviously by reading the book, doing your courses and following all those answers you give, is looking at the inner child. And once we understand, because not everybody knows that the inner child exists, and once we start looking at people, we can see sometimes their reactions are based on a childish tantrum outburst rather than an emotion intelligent response. And I found through Regress to Cause, working with my clients, is that we can show them that, because they're not always aware. So in future, when the time comes, that old pattern match is gone. What's the word I'm looking for? It's gone, yeah.
Exactly. You just find out where it came from and resolve it there. So if you've ever felt insecure, you've been your inner child.
Yeah.
If you've ever felt like, oh, you know, I'm being rejected, you've just met your inner child.
Yeah.
The part, anyone who's trained in parts therapy, you're working parts. Feeling parts are child parts. So we don't have one inner child. We have many, many, many inner children. And so the ones that we want to deal with are the ones that were traumatized.
Yeah.
And trauma is not what people think. Trauma is the perception of threat while in a state of helplessness.
Helplessness, yeah, that's the way.
Helplessness is the natural state of the child.
Yeah.
And children are easily threatened by anything they don't understand. If they can't make sense of their environment, it's going to generate fear. If there's no one there to support them, they're going to, you know, that's going to generate fear. So that's trauma.
And I see that a lot in
time.
And when we
these
look
things get blown out of proportion, right?
Yeah. Especially if they've had like a life where they've had 2 grandparents. Now, the majority of us always have a loving grandparent. We always have a bit of a grandpa stern, and you know, so you've got the child go into one grandma's house where they get spoiled chocolate biscuits, the princess or the prince, then they go to the other grandma, and it's like, get on with it, roll up your sleeves. This is life, you know. We get on with it, and they've got the child becomes at a young age can become quite split, because they know they've got to act one way to please that grandma, one way to act to please that one, and then the parents, then they go
Right.
to school and they get their teachers and they meet all these other children, and it's like, wow. When you look at it that way, can you imagine how overwhelming it is to be a child, you know, when you've got all these things and they've not got that they're not consciously developed in that area, are they, to kind of understand and make those decisions? So yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this is, I mean, welcome to planet Earth. This is, you know, just how it is for us growing up. It's, you know, traumatic experience, again, most of the time it's not a big deal. Most of the time what you'll find is that you'll go back, you'll find that 3-year-old, and that, you know, the mummy's dropping the 3-year-old off at the babysitter's, and the child thinks, oh, I'm being abandoned, because the child doesn't know mom's going to come back. And this can generate a lifelong anxiety disorder. You know, and it's no big deal. Once you resolve that, you know, in the causal event, then basically the problem will take care of itself. It's not that simple. There's a little, you know, I mean, you have to generalize all those changes and what have you. But this is the understanding that these things can get started. What, you know, Parkhill said, the subconscious mind has this gift for making mountains out of molehills. And that's most of the time that's what we find. But the thing to remember is that it's not what happened that's the problem. It's how what was happening was interpreted that makes it traumatic. And every one of us, I'll tell you what, if you crawled in through the womb into this life, you have trauma in childhood. It's just that those experiences are nature's way of building resilience. If you manage to get through a scary event, you know, like a dog barked at me and I thought it was going to bite me, and then I found out it was a friendly little puppy. Okay, I got through it, I'm okay, I learned something valuable from that. Now I've got some resilience in that area. It's when there's no one there to support the child and help the child to get through that event and know, because the subconscious mind locks that in and doesn't know that the child's not grown, or the client's not grown up, because that part of them, that inner child, has been fragmented and is trapped in that event. So that's what we want to do. In the shamanic tradition, this is called soul retrieval.
Yeah, true.
It's a soul fragment.
True. We're both big fans of shamanistic work as well, aren't we? So I love bringing it into the sessions because I don't know, with my journey in shamanism, it's made me quite intuitive. Do you know,
well,
when
you know, much of psychotherapy is rooted in you'll find you'll find a bridge between shamanic practices and psychotherapy. For example, the Iroquois used to practice dream reenactment. So if someone in the tribe had a particular dream that was about, oh, like we went to battle and we were victorious, and we went on a hunt and we came back with all the buffalo we needed to get through the winter. You know, when they had a dream that was important to the tribe, they would actually do like a ceremony and they would reenact the dream so that everyone could participate in it and they could build the energy of expectancy around that. Well, it's called psychodrama.
Exactly. I know.
Okay, there's nothing new under the sun.
There's
so the stuff that we are using in hypnotherapy, it has its roots in psychotherapy. And if you go back a little bit further, you will find much of the stuff that's in psychotherapy is also rooted in shamanic traditions. It's because it works. It works with the human psyche.
It does. It does. And one of my teachers was actually a teacher in postgrad on the doctorate course in the university near me. And she has a GP practice, so we'd go for every month. We go. She called them the Larians, or something we'd call them. But we done some really weird and wacky things, which at first is a bit like, oh my god. I remember saying to my friend, "Where have you brought me now here?" And we had to go through the whole year training, but I did the Incan tradition training first. So I think my heart's down in the Incas in that. But some fantastic, amazing things that I've never heard of any other healing course I've ever done. But yeah, I remember when I did my research, my hypnotherapy assignments, I traced it right back to find it in shamanistic times. That's why I love reading in your book, actually, share this. You've got a really good history that takes it back further than any other things that I've seen, any other kind of books I've seen. It goes back into the Egyptian times. You mentioned, not Asclepius, in hypnotherapy, you mentioned him, and how it just goes right back to other healing modalities, doesn't it? So I know.
Well, I got curious, and I just like, where's this coming from? So I just started following the thread. But, that's what we do with regression as well. So you need to be curious, like, where's this coming from? So that's all I did. I just basically followed the thread back historically. And so I shared some of that because I found it interesting. But the book itself is, I used a Grimm's fairy tale to illustrate.
I was about to say, I've just finished reading I'm on chapter 7 now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the cover of the book right there.
Mine's a bit worn though, because I keep falling asleep when I'm reading it. But I've got through the last part of the metaphor today of the story. And because a lot of people have asked me actually, why is she called it the Devil's Therapy? Why? I said, well, buy the book, it's all in there. You'll find it exactly when you think.
Well, it's a great fairy tale, and it just happens to include a character who is the devil, and the devil, in fact, is the therapist, and he helps. The client is a soldier who agrees to undergo the devil's therapy, and in the end, he has a completely new life.
Yeah, if I must.
Yeah, you haven't got through the whole story yet, but you're going to love how this turns out.
Right, okay. Right.
This is a fairy tale that has a happy ending.
Good, yeah. Then so I've got my hot chocolate ready for later, my extra energy, and I need to get it on Kindle, because when I read on a Kindle, the backlight keeps my eyes open. When I read a normal book, I can find myself kind of nodding off.
Yeah, it's available on Kindle too.
I know.
But you want the print version, because it's got an index in the back, which will allow you to go back if you want to find something later. And this was originally, I wrote this as a textbook.
Right.
And so this is not a how-to book. This is a why book. Because if you see, again, I want to change how you think about therapeutic hypnosis. If you understand why you're doing what you're doing, you'll know exactly what to do in your sessions.
And that's one of the other reasons I wanted to interview as well and speak with you, is because, in the UK, I see a lot of people are quiet. I see a lot of women that are quiet. You don't see many women in the UK that are out there doing podcasts, talking more women out there in the UK, seeing them more out there on YouTube and being very visual is the word I'm looking for. I know we've got Kaz Riley, she's amazing. We see a lot from Kaz in the group as well with the recordings she makes. But I want to see more. My aim to start the UK Women in Hypnosis was to see more of us out there more. Maybe it's not for everybody, but I want hypnotherapy is such an amazing therapy. And my degree is in complementary health, Reiki, all the different modalities that we do. But when I really needed something, it was the hypnosis I went back to 4 years ago. And that's what set me up looking more. And I'll be honest, I was one of those therapists that when I did my hypnoanalysis, when I was working with weight loss, and this is what I found, and a lot of therapists will agree with me, when you start working with the weight, you can uncover a lot of trauma there. And I didn't feel I was equipped to deal with it. So I stepped back and did further training, did psychology and obesity, and went on to further myself there. But I think it's because when you're in training, it's all lovely and it's nice. And then when you go out into the real world, your clients are your teachers. You can study as much as you want, but it's those people sitting in front of you that will teach you the most. And this is why I want, and I can't demand that everyone will do your course, Wendie. This is not a sales video. I want to make that really clear. It's about education. And it's about giving the therapist the guts, the courage and the compassion to go there with their clients with confidence and understanding, exactly, why am I doing this, The same as we tell our clients. If I say to my clients, if your roof collapsed on the floor right now in your living room, you wouldn't call the roofer out and sit there with him for 6 weeks and discuss how why it could have happened. Was it the rain, the porosity of the storm? Was it hailstones that caused the roof? Oh, I don't know. We need to work. No, let's fix the roof. Let's get to work and fix the roof, So it's not the why.
You gotta work with what the client brings you, right? you work with what the client brings you. I actually,
Yeah.
you just reminded me of a client. You're talking about, they end up on the floor. I had a client do that, exactly that. We did it was a pretty intense session, just a tremendous amount of emotional catharsis, lots of clearing, lots of insights, a lot of pain from childhood. There was abuse. At the end of the session, he literally slid right out of the chair onto the floor. And it was like he was this little puddle. This little boy was on the floor, and I got down on the floor with him, and I put the blanket over him, and I put a pillow under his head, and I just started delivering soothing suggestions. And I said, you just cry that out. You just get that cry all out. You're going to feel so good. And he wept and wept and wept. And at the end of that session, he was clear. It was just the most magnificent. I get teary just thinking about it now, and he was in so much distress when he came to me. And this was not a one session fix either. This was a lifetime problem that was erupting in multiple areas of his life. And it was not a one session fix, but this particular session was just absolutely magnificent for him. And he was willing, he was ready, willing, and able to do the work required. And there is no way that I could have said, he's got this, this issue, I'll do this technique on him. I had to let him lead and basically, okay, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do now. And then he would shift gears, and it's like, that's where we're going. Okay, now we're going to do this. Yeah. And all I really did was just create it's like a hermetic vessel you create, a safe cocoon for the client to deal with their stuff, to face their feelings, to face those memories. And they are the warriors. They are, they have that ability. They have that strength. They have that power within them. They just don't know it. And through the process, they discover it. Yeah. And that is a moment of empowerment. And those are the things now you can take your techniques and now you can use them to build that empowerment and to grow, like you said, now the ground is clear. Now you can start planting those seeds and they're going to germinate in front of your eyes. And it's just the most rewarding moment in a session when you realize, these are getting in. He's accepting these suggestions. She's changing in front of my eyes. This is amazing.
I know, I love something. There's a technique that one of my friends, another hypnotherapist, Derek Chapman, does. He likes to take photos of the person at the start, and then at the end of the therapy, he sees the face is all lit up, and it's just so lovely to see, isn't it? I did it with one of my clients a few weeks back, and I was going, can I just take a photo? She was on screen. I wanted to show your face, and she texted back when I sent her. She went, wow, because it reminds me of when I was younger, and she showed me a photograph. She said, I've not felt like that in a long time, and it's so lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
like there's this light, this light that just it emits from the person when they've cleared something. Even if you didn't get the whole thing, you're going to see that shift.
Definitely. Do you know what, moving down the list for you now is we've talked about recovering emotional issues, which is really important with the regressive cause. You mention a lot in your book someone called Candice Pert. She's written a lot on the emotions, and I was watching a few weeks back Dr. Andrew Huberman. I'm a big fan of his work, and he was interviewing about the science of emotions. And I can't remember who the lady was, but she was talking about how people cannot agree on the emotions and what they are and how they work. But for me personally, our emotions are our reactions that are linked to a stored memory. What would you?
Okay, I guess it just depends on what your field is and how you work with emotions. Emotions, for a scientist, emotions are the biochemistry of the body. Yeah. And that's certainly true because we feel emotions in our body. And this is an important element of regression that it's very important to identify what the actual emotion is. If you try to work with anxiety isn't an emotion. It's a kind of a pervasive antsy feeling that a person feels throughout the body, but it isn't an emotion. If you can get behind the anxiety and find what that actual emotion is, You know, it could be anger.
Mm.
Anger will generate anxiety, or it could be fear. But if you can get the actual emotion, you'll know you've got the emotion because it will be targeted in the body. It'll be in the gut, the chest, or the throat. It's in the torso, and it's a targeted feeling. And the stronger that feeling is, the stronger the signal is that's coming out of the event that caused it.
Yeah.
So this is where an emotion is very useful. We use it to bridge back to the event. So what is an emotion? An emotion is a response to a thought.
Yeah.
And a thought is a response to a perception.
Yeah.
So if the perception is, usually a perception is the way I define it is, we have 5 sensory perception, right? So we're inputting data from our environment. We're either hearing, or we're seeing, or we're smelling, or we're tasting, or we're feeling something going on in our environment. And this is the data that we're inputting. An infant is inputting data. And so how we make sense of that data is really age dependent. For an infant, if there's something that feels off about that, because we do have an intuitive sense, if it's off somehow to the infant, there will be physical tension in the body. That's really the primary response in infancy, and we have that throughout our life. So if the body starts to tense up and constrict, there's something is off. If we're relaxed and we start to expand, then that's a feeling of well-being. But what happens as you get older and you start to develop cognitive abilities, that tensing, constricted response, which is really, I think, sort of a physiological response, our response to that will then be to interpret it. We try to make sense of our environment so that we can predict what's going to happen next. And so making sense of that constricted sensations in the body could be erroneous. You know, a 3-year-old might think, oh, mommy's leaving me at the babysitter's, and the thought is, I'm being abandoned, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
That could be the thought, and that will generate tremendous fear. And if that locks in, if that doesn't get resolved, and then it happens again, something else happens again, and it reinforces that thought, it's going to make that emotion stronger. So the emotion is not the first response. It's a response to the interpretation of what's happening. And this is what makes us unique as a species. Although all mammals have emotions, human beings think.
Yeah.
And so we make sense of our environment cognitively, and also we use thinking to suppress our emotions.
Yeah.
And part of that is encultured as well. You know, it's like, I'll give you something to cry about, young lady. So we think, oh, I better not feel that feeling. Yeah. And so that just adds to the underlying problem.
Yeah, definitely. And do you know, when we go back and we find and the healing has been done, a big part of your work is about forgiveness, and it seems to be a bit of a controversial subject this in our field. Oh, forgiveness, we can't do that. That's just letting them off the hook. We can't do that. And so somebody, a well-known trainer, I won't mention his name, but he talks, I like the way he looks at forgiveness is acceptance. I quite liked the way he's not a believer in it, but acceptance was his thing. And I thought, especially if you work with people who have been sadly sexually abused, raped, when they're faced to being told you've got to forgive your perpetrator, and it's a kind of there's no way I can do that, that has happened to me with some of my clients. But to look at it the way you explain it, the way you understand and you teach forgiveness, do you want to share a bit about that? Because you do a big part of that course.
I learned forgiveness from the inside.
Yeah.
So although I had been trained in it and all the reasons why you should forgive and how to convince a client to forgive, I didn't really fully understand forgiveness until I experienced it from the inside. And I will tell you right now, it has nothing to do with reason. Forgiveness is the healing. Yeah. When the client lets go of the problem, the attachment to the problem, when they let go of the grievance toward the person that hurt them, they heal. They're no longer carrying that problem around inside of them. Forgiveness is always about somebody who hurt us.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to forgive an event that happened. You know, if it's already always someone who is to blame. And the problem with this is that children cannot blame. Usually the offender is the parent, whether they, you know, purposefully or unpurposefully cause the child harm. The child cannot blame the parent because the risk is that they're going to lose the love of the parent. And so the child internalizes the blame. So this is the underlying, this is the root of guilt and shame. Guilt is essentially, I did something wrong. Shame is essentially, there's something wrong with me, that I'm intrinsically broken. But it's the same thing. And it's not an emotion. It's a thought. There's something wrong with me. It's a thought. I've done something wrong. I've done something bad. I'm bad. And so it generates internal fear. When a child internalizes the blame, they internalize the offender. And so the person that hurt us becomes an internal representation. It's a part of us. So when we're doing the forgiveness work, we're not forgiving the person that hurt us. They could be dead and gone 40 years ago. They're in the past. That person no longer exists. I've had people who have forgiven their mother because the mother that hurt them when they were 3 years old is not the same mother that they have today. They're the best of friends. Yeah. But they needed to forgive the mother who hurt them when they were 3 because that mother is internalized and that mother is still hurting them on the inside. And so releasing the anger and releasing the fear toward that internalized representation sets the client free from the attachment to that destructive part of them, to that hurtful part of them. And so they can forgive and release that individual, and they set themselves free as a result.
That's good. I've never heard it like that. So they're internalizing that part of them, that perpetrator becomes an offended part then. Very interesting.
Right, it's an echo from the past.
Definitely, yeah. I think for me, I've seen, do you know when they've had a great relationship with mum and dad or whoever there's been their guardian, but there has been some form of abuse by an external boyfriend, girl, whoever's come into the family. When the anger is not directed eventually at the perpetrator, it's directed at the parent. Why did you leave me with that person? And it's almost them.
Yeah, there's
to recognize that they feel anger against the person that they love, and if the parents passed on, they don't want to talk badly about their loved one who's now passed, and it's all that guilt of saying something bad about the parent.
So there's lots of things bouncing around in my head right now. First of all, a client will come into you and they'll say, oh, I don't need to forgive them. Or, oh, I forgave them long ago, or whatever. Don't believe it. You are talking to the conscious mind now. It has a reason for everything. The 3-year-old is still hurt. It's the 3-year-old that needs to be rescued, and then the forgiveness work will take place. So so whatever the conscious mind tells you, you need to listen to the conscious mind, because it's going to provide clues as to the history that's responsible for creating the problem. But the conscious mind now can say, I had a client say, oh I went to therapy, I did 20 years of therapy, I've forgiven my dad. Guess who was responsible for the problem? And when she emerged from that forgiveness session, she looked at me and she said, if you had told me that I would have to go through that and forgive my dad, I would have told you were nuts. But you see, that's head forgiveness. It's not the same thing. Forgiveness is when you let go of the emotional charge. It happens automatically. Forgiveness is not something that we do. Forgiveness is a byproduct of releasing the energy of blame and shame and guilt and hurt and fear that you're holding inside of yourself. And it has to happen toward that internalized part of you, because that's the part that's causing the problem. And once that happens, liberation is at hand.
Do you know when?
So it's really a very process.
It was great, because in your training course you've got a side video on it that you go off to, and it was a couple of years ago when I did yours, and I remember sitting on my sofa downstairs, and you did this thing about the inner child, but the adult forgiving the inner child as well. It's something, a concept I've never looked at before or heard of before. I don't know if you recall that, but it was very deep and powerful. It was almost like the forgiveness of each other, the acceptance of each other. Can you?
No, it's not ringing any bells, but
right, okay.
no.
I'll try and find
but
it.
one of the things that I didn't mention in the course that you're talking about, the Ready for Regression course, that I don't mention it in that because, to be honest, it came to clarity while I was writing the book.
Right.
And I built that course a while back. But here's the piece that finally came to me. I get it. That we do the inner child work first, because it's the child that has been traumatized that needs to be released from that event, and then we grow the child up. So regression is you go back to the causal event, that's the initial sensitizing event, and then we grow the child up through subsequent events up to adulthood.
Yeah.
So that child is now grown up and is now integrated as part of the adult consciousness of the client. It's the adult that does the forgiveness work.
Yeah.
Because the child doesn't hold the grievance. The child has internalized it.
Right.
The adult goes into that, gray room or steps into the scene and faces mom or dad and does the forgiveness work. And sometimes the forgiveness has to do with, and I'll give you a tip. It's most of the time it's about mom. Even if mom wasn't there, that can be a problem. The child wanted mom to be there. And so there's a grievance that's buried in there that she wasn't there and she should have been. Interesting, huh?
It is very.
So whoever the primary caregiver was, usually it's mom, right? So if mom wasn't there to rescue the child, or if mom wasn't there to help the child make sense of what was going on, or if mom was the person that, hurt the child for whatever means, then mom needs to be forgiven. So I just routinely made that part of the therapeutic process, that I would always put mom in front of the client and have them forgive them, even if mom didn't need to be forgiven. Forgive her anyway, you're going to feel that much better.
Yeah, I love, that's my favorite. I don't call it chair therapy, I call it swear therapy.
Swear therapy?
In the chair.
Oh, swear therapy. Yeah, chair therapy. Yeah, exactly. And there's even research that shows that cussing is therapeutic. It's holding it in that is killing people. You've got to get it out. You've got to express those emotions. Emotions trapped in the body foster disease. It's like an infection, and it just keeps multiplying and multiplying. You want to regurgitate that stuff, spew it out, vomit it out. I've had people go back to events of abuse and want to throw up. They said, "Oh my God, I'm going to vomit." I kept a bowl next to my chair for that purpose. I just put it in their lap and say, "Well, let it rip." Whatever you need to do to get that out, you get that out. The only place it can hurt you is trapped inside. You keep that in your body, it makes you sick. You get it out, you get well.
Yeah.
I never had anybody throw up. I had people spit up though.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. I've not personally, but I've seen it happen. But do you know what?
That's a deep hurt.
Something you said in the beginning, and listening to you talking, I was like, we are as hypnotherapists, we are the last port of call. They've done everything. They've been to the white court route, where they've had to sit and behave in front of the white courter, because if they share everything, how would they be judged or labeled or diagnosed? I think when you come to a hypnotherapist like us, is it welcome home? Welcome home. This is the place that you can come and just be you. And when I used to have my clinic, I used to have a part of my consultation form to look at the swear words that they were okay with, that they could use, and give permission that you can be who you want. These 4 walls are very confidential, and you can just be what you want and just bring it all up.
Yeah, I would always tell the client, this is a safe place. Yeah. This is Vegas. What goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't care what language you use. If you want to say fuck, you say fuck.
Yeah.
If you want to say bitch, you say bitch. I said, you are not going to offend me. Okay. Yeah. And I will demonstrate a couple of cuss words just to make it safe for the client to use that language. And you watch their body when you say that, because you can tell, you know, if cussing was not allowed, they'll get tense. And if this is permission, they'll start to relax. But either way, they need to know, I want your authenticity. I don't want you holding anything back here. You're not, you know, there's nothing verboten here.
Yeah, exactly. So I know I'm giggling at some of the memories, some of the stuff I've done. I should have my own chair, really. I get them to imagine sometimes. Or if I'm working online, I've literally got a tub chair behind me, and I'll bring the tub chair and I'll move to one side and I'll say, there's your chair. That's the kind of person who's sitting there. So yeah. And that's another thing as well, which with Regress to Cause, is how creative that you can get. And part of therapy is all about creations anyway, but how creative that you can get with your clients to work. And I think creativity as a therapist is a huge kind of, not so much a gift. I think some of us have got it more naturally, but it's a huge thing to work on and to play around with, because creativity can do the most amazing things, can't it, as well?
It does. And that's a really great topic to bring up, because one of the things that, I mean, your greatest gift in the session room is your creative thinking. It's your ability to say, oh, that's interesting. I bet we could play with that. I bet we could go somewhere with that. And, you know, and it just kind of percolates up. But I also noticed that a lot of new practitioners, they come out of the classroom and they want to get creative right away. And that's a mistake, because you really need to master the basics before you start getting creative. The reason for that is that if you start getting, you're going to contaminate the fundamentals. That's what will happen, and then you won't get the results. And I've seen this, you know, time and time again. It's like, no, just do the basics, just follow the steps 1, 2, 3 until you lock it in that this is what needs to happen. And then you can start to get you know, creative as you're moving through those specific steps. It's kind of like dancing, right? Like learning ballroom dancing, for example, you learn like a box step, right? 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step. It's pretty boring. But then once you get that down and it's like second nature, now you start doing circles and, you know, you can get really beautiful on the dance floor, and you're still doing the same 4 steps.
Yeah. You remind me, I used to teach Zumba years ago, and I'm dyspraxic, so coordination for me is just not something that comes naturally. So I trained as a Zumba instructor just to overcome and see what I could do with it, and I loved it. At first, it wasn't learning the simple salsa movements, 1 step aside together, and then you're there, the hips are moving and you're flowing, and the next thing up on the stage teaching. So it was a great flow. Yes, that's a good analogy. And I used to ballroom dance when I was younger as well. So yeah, that's a really good. I never did master the tango, the easiest one, mind. There we go. But anyway, so to move on to the last thing, because I've had a list of questions I wanted to. I think that for me, the main objective of this was to show therapists that Regress to Cause can be amazing. It can be fun. I've had fun with working with it as well, and it's something that we shouldn't be shying away with. And it's not about re-traumatizing. It's far from that. And it's trying to get. What my aim was to get that message across is to go there.
Yeah, and it's also not for everybody. You know, it's not for every client. Not every issue requires regression. And not every client is going to be ready or willing or able to do the regression work either. So you really need to qualify your clients, you know, to pre-assess what's going to be the best route to go with this client. For example, if you've got someone who's undergoing medical treatment like chemotherapy or something, and they're, you know, and they're just really, really weak and they don't have a lot of energy, you know, they're probably not going to have the energy to do that releasing work. If you've got somebody who's palliative, you want to do comfort care for them. You know, there's a point where the body just doesn't have the energy to release the energy to bring on the healing, and we have to face that fact. If you're dealing with a client who just wants you know, a behavior change. They don't want to look at what caused the behavior or whatever. Now you're looking at symptom management, and that's where your techniques are really handy. Now you can use those, but it's kind of an ongoing sort of thing. You know, they're never really going to be rid of the problem. But you never know. You know, maybe if they come in for a tune-up once a month or whatever, they can maintain, you know, and continue to be able to manage. Or maybe you can teach them some self-management techniques that they can use on their own. It's all about assessing the client and what's going to be appropriate for them, where they're at in their life, and what it is that they're dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. So we've looked at the forgiveness, and we've done the inner child. We've looked at that. So what would be your final closing message then? We know what the book and what the course is covering, because we're going to share that link after so they can see. I know a lot of girls in the UK Women in Hypnosis have already taken part in your training courses, and they absolutely loved and adored it. And again, even the more experienced therapists has certainly opened their eyes up to so much more, you know. But with the book, to go back to the book, The Devil's Therapy, and again, the burning question I get asked, why was it all about the devil? It's not. And I want to show mine. Mine's so warm.
Because the devil is the guy in the woods. The devil is anything that has ever been considered culturally unconventional or not mainstream has been accused of being the work of the devil. You know, at one time, bloodletting was medicine.
Yeah.
And if you weren't practicing medicine, you were, you know, if you weren't bloodletting, you were doing the work of the devil.
Yeah.
At one time, the healers who lived on the outskirts of town, so that they would have access to the woods where they gathered the herbs and the, you know, the flora and fauna that they needed for their remedies. Those individuals were considered, you know, agents of the devil because they didn't live in town.
Yeah.
And when the Inquisition came to town, you know, witch burning began. And so, you know, I mean, this is just sort of a cultural thing. I share the history of that, you know, when the devil was created and for what purpose that served. But the fairy tale actually gives you a positive spin on the devil. And that comes out of mythologically, the devil rules the underworld.
Yeah.
Hell is the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And when a person is struggling with a problem that they just cannot resolve, that consciously they're not able to resolve, then they need someone who can give them access to the subconscious level of mind to resolve that. And that's the devil. That's his domain.
And going down into the, they call it in the income shamans, was going into the underworld. To gather your army, to go, that's right. We gather our army where we go.
And in the Persian tradition, there were two gods. They were twin gods. Many ancient religions or spiritual traditions had twin gods. And in the Persian tradition, you had God and the devil. They had different names, but basically God was the God that was responsible for non-material needs, your spiritual needs. So if you wanted peace, or you wanted, you know, the higher spiritual guidance or something like that, then you would apply to the God upstairs. But if you wanted stuff in the world, if you wanted physical healing, if you wanted a new husband or wife, if you wanted money, if any of the things of the worldly things, you had to go to the guy downstairs because that was his department.
Yeah. That makes sense. We put it like that then. So Wendie, the book The Devil's Therapy, it's on Amazon at the minute. You can buy it, and the price, I believe, is?
Yes, it is available in Australia, the UK, Canada, Germany, Italy, Spain, France, India, a couple other places I can't remember right now. Pretty much anywhere.
In all those languages. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how much is it to buy on, I know the British version was, I can't see on mine, because mine was a gift from lovely Wendie, thank you. The lovely surprise of the week of the post. They can buy, is it 99 on Amazon? British?
You know, I
have to look.
You know, I don't, it depends on where you are, right?
Yeah, it's true.
I think like in the US, I think it's $29.99 for the print book.
We'll
but the Kindle is $9.99.
Fab.
and
the
then
course,
it's converted wherever you
the whole course, and has it been launched, the whole course in its entirety on the Tribe of Healers website?
Oh, I have 3 courses there.
Yeah.
We should talk about the Ready for Regression course on another time.
We'll keep that
but what I would invite all of your viewers to do is just go to tribeofhealers.com, and maybe you can put a link just to the site there. I have a free course. It's the Hypnosis Practice Business course. And it's a 5-step blueprint for organizing your business around this. It took me years to figure this out. This is how I built my business. And my approach to doing regression hypnosis. Actually, I give you the outline for it. It's like, this is, if you do it this way, it works.
I've done that. I've done a few business modules. I've done it on my degree business modules, and yours made so much more sense. More get out there and go type of training rather than I really enjoy
and this is specifically for people that are in the healing profession as well. You just, you know, if you just follow these five steps in organizing how you do business, you'll find that it's a lot easier for you, and you'll get much better results.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a free course there on the Tribe of Healers. We'll add the link next to this video. I'm sure we'll work out how to do that. Link to the book.
There's also I have lots of blog posts, and once you sign up for the course, you're on my list. And then once a week, I send out a newsletter, and I usually include a link to a video. I have short little video clips with tips and tricks to help you tweak your technique in the session room. Sometimes I find other stuff that I think, oh, this is so relevant. Like right now, I'm on a Gabor Mate binge, and I just like this. He's the man. This is a guy you want to read everything. He's not a hypnosis guy. He is a healer, and the core of his work is compassion. And the stuff that he's written in the realm of Hungry Ghosts is all about addiction. It is completely relevant to the work of regression hypnosis. He's written a book called Scattered Minds, which is about attention deficit disorder. And it is completely relevant to the work that we do as regression hypnotherapists. Another book, When the Body Says No, was not my favorite book, but it was written for the general public. And so it kind of gives an overview of how mind and body are working together, and how physiological illnesses, because he's an MD, how physical illness is a result of what's going on in the mind. So everything he's put out is absolute gold. I highly recommend just buy my book and buy his at the same time, and you will have a complete library.
He is so humble, isn't he? Such a humble person as well. I tell you, whilst I and John, I used to flick between Gabor Mate and Jordan Peterson. I used to like watching. I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
I used to love him, Alberto. The ones I find some, I binge on them. I'm like you. Alberto Vidolo, fantastic. He mixes the worlds together brilliantly. He's got a great book called In the Healing Realms, and he brings a different side of the devil in, which is really, really interesting. And I think Andrew Haberman was my one the other week, or a few months before Christmas. But Jordan Peterson, I used to watch it between him and Gabor Mate. I used to flick between them both and just watch hours and hours of them. And there's so much great stuff out there on YouTube, isn't there, that they can go find there. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on my time is very, very tight because I get so many projects I'm working on. But I used to own a bookstore, and so I'm a bit of a book addict. I own more books than I ever get to read, but I do my very best to get through them and write, you know, if it's Gabor Mate stuff, I'm reading it. There's another one I'm reading right now, which is called Emotion Focused Therapy. It's a bit of a tough slug. It's very academic reading, but again, it's completely relevant to the work that we do.
Is that Candace Pert as well? Is that her book?
No, Candace Pert's book was Molecules of Emotion. And she was recognized as a real leader in the field of psychoneuroimmunology. But if you want a shortcut, get her audio recording. It's a talk that she gave, and so you can get the audio recording, and it's called Your Subconscious is Your Body is the body is the subconscious mind. That's what it is. Your body is your subconscious mind. So it's an audio recording. You can get it on Amazon, and it's basically a 2-part talk that she gave, like a live presentation that she gave, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's completely relevant to healing with the mind.
Yeah, so much. It's a lifelong study, isn't it? It's lifelong. I've got where I work. I've got like a double bedroom. So this is kind of my working area, and then the other side is I've got my television, and I never watch television. I only put YouTube on it, so I can kind of, if I go to bed at 8 o'clock most nights, I can just binge watch whatever tickles my fancy.
Yeah, I like to spend my evenings with Netflix.
Yeah.
Need some downtime too, you know.
I know it's fab. So Wendie, thank you so much for joining me this evening, this morning with you over in Canada. And so just to remind those of you watching, this is Wendie Webber, author of The Devil's Therapy, founder of a tribe of healers, and as I like to call her, and don't blush, she is my pure genius and my go-to with Regress to Cause Hypnosis every single time. The book itself, we're going to flash it to you again. You can find it on Amazon. We've got it on Kindle also, available in numerous languages. So wherever you're watching in the world, there's going to be one in your language. Isn't that right, Wendie? Well done. And we've also got the course. Her course is on her website as well, which again, subscribe to Wendie's website. There's a free course you can do about getting your business off the ground and out there, and also lots of different articles that Wendie does upload throughout the weeks. And I've got such a lot from reading the articles that she does share. So do yourself a favor and join the tribe of healers. Subscribe.
Oh, I almost forgot too.
Yeah.
There's a free infographic.
What's that?
If you go to devilstherapy.com, you can get a free infographic of the whole system.
What does that mean? That's a posh word.
Devilstherapy.com.
You've got devilstherapy.com.
Yep. DEVILSTHERAPY.com.
Cool. And there's an infographic.
An infographic of the 3-phase 7-step process for regression to cause hypnosis.
Fantastic.
And the goal of effective regression, this is why I said effective regression hypnotherapy. This is not past life regression. This is regression to cause, and effective because the goal is a lasting result. The goal is effortless permanence.
Yes, I love that word, effortless, one of my favorite words. I like that. So effortless permanence is what we're all looking for, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, if you have got any questions about the video, please do ask us. Please send us a message. I will be sharing this in all the hypnotherapy forums across the world, and please send your questions on to us, and I'm sure we'll be more than happy to get back to with anything. Isn't that right, Wendie?
Absolutely. Anything she says.
Yeah, so yes. Okay, then thanks all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. And now I'm going to press stop recording. Bye everyone. See you in the next video.